My parents called me at 2 a.m., their voices shaking, begging for $15,000 to save my brother from jail. They said it was urgent. They said he was in danger. They said I was the only one who could help. So I said yes. But hours later, my phone rang again, and this time it was the police. What they told me made my stomach drop, because in that moment I realized I hadn't saved my brother at all. I had just helped the wrong person. Stay with me, because what I discovered next destroyed my family, cost me everything I'd saved, and forced me to choose between blood and what was right. If you've ever felt trapped between family and doing the right thing, you need to hear this. Subscribe and listen till the end, because the truth behind that police call changes everything. And before this story ends, I want you to ask yourself, what would you have done? The phone's shrill ring cut through the darkness like a knife through silk. Sarah Chen's eyes snapped open, her heart already racing before her mind fully registered what had pulled her from sleep. The digital clock on her nightstand glowed an accusatory 2:07 a.m. in harsh red numbers. Nothing good ever came from calls at this hour. Her hand fumbled across the nightstand, knocking over a water glass that she'd mercifully left empty. The phone's screen illuminated her face with ghostly light as she squinted at the caller ID. Mom. Her stomach twisted into a familiar knot of dread and obligation. Hello? Her voice came out hoarse, thick with interrupted sleep. Sarah, thank God you answered. Her mother's voice was sharp with panic, each word tumbling over the next in a breathless cascade. We need your help. It's Marcus. He's in serious trouble. Sarah sat up, the sheets pooling around her waist. Marcus. Of course it was Marcus. Her younger brother had been in trouble more times than she could count over the past 5 years. Each crisis had cost her something, financially or emotionally, and usually both. But her mother's voice carried a different quality this time. Something raw and genuine that made Sarah's chest tighten despite her exhaustion. What happened? Sarah asked, already dreading the answer. He was arrested tonight. Some kind of accident, I don't understand all of it, but the bail is $15,000, Sarah. $15,000. We don't have that kind of money. You know we don't. Her mother's voice cracked, and Sarah could hear her father's gruff murmur in the background, adding urgency to the plea. Sarah closed her eyes, pressing her palm against her forehead. $15,000. The number sat in her mind like a stone in still water, ripples of consequence spreading outward. That was nearly all of her emergency savings, the safety net she'd spent 3 years carefully building. The fund that was supposed to be for her future, for the photography studio she dreamed of opening, for a life that was finally her own. Mom, she started, but her mother cut her off. He could be seriously hurt in there, Sarah. You know what happens to people in jail. He's your brother, your only brother. The words came loaded with the weight of shared history, of family obligation that ran deeper than logic or fairness. We're his parents, and we're asking you to help us help him. Please. In the background, her father's voice rose, sharp and commanding. Tell her we need it by morning. The bail hearing is at 9. If we don't post bail, he stays locked up until trial. That could be months, Sarah. Months. Sarah's throat felt tight. She thought of Marcus at 7 years old, holding her hand on the first day of kindergarten, his small fingers wrapped around hers with complete trust. She thought of Marcus at 16, stealing money from her wallet and lying about it to her face. She thought of Marcus at 23, promising he'd changed, that this time would be different, that he'd pay her back. He'd never paid her back. What was he arrested for? Sarah asked, trying to keep her voice steady, trying to find some solid ground in the shifting sand of this conversation. Does it matter? Her mother's voice turned defensive, a tone Sarah knew well. He's your brother. Family helps family, that's what we do. It matters to me, Mom. I need to know what I'm being asked to do here. A long silence stretched between them, filled only with the sound of her mother's ragged breathing. Finally, her father's voice came through, having apparently taken the phone. There was an accident, a car accident. Someone was hurt. They're saying Marcus was driving under the influence, but we don't know the whole story yet, the lawyer says. Someone was hurt? Sarah's voice rose despite herself. How badly? We don't know yet. That's why we need to get him out, so we can figure this out properly. The public defender is useless. We need to get Marcus a real lawyer, and we need him out of jail to help with his own defense. Sarah stood up, pacing across her small bedroom. Through her window, the city spread out below her apartment, a constellation of lit windows representing other lives, other problems, other families having their own 2 a.m. crises. She wondered how many of them were as complicated as hers. I need time to think about this, she said quietly. There is no time. Her mother had the phone again, her voice climbing toward hysteria. The bail hearing is in 7 hours. 7 hours, Sarah. Do you want your brother to suffer because you needed to think about it? What kind of sister are you? The accusation landed like a physical blow. What kind of sister? It was a question Sarah had asked herself 1,000 times in 1,000 different ways. What kind of sister sets boundaries? What kind of sister says no? What kind of sister protects herself when family needs help? I'll call you back in an hour, Sarah said, her voice flat with exhaustion and the beginning of resignation that she could already feel creeping through her veins like cold water. Sarah, don't you dare. She ended the call. Her hands were shaking. She sat down on the edge of her bed and stared at nothing, her mind a whirlwind of conflicting thoughts and emotions. The responsible part of her, the part that had worked so hard to build a stable life, screamed at her not to do this. $15,000 for Marcus, who had never been there for her, who had taken and never given back. Marcus, who had made a choice to drink and drive, who had hurt someone, who was old enough to face the consequences of his actions. But the other part of her, the part that remembered the little boy who had nightmares and crawled into her bed for comfort, the part that still felt the weight of being the oldest, the responsible one, the one who was supposed to protect him, that part whispered that she had no choice. That family was family, for better or worse. Her phone buzzed with a text message. Her mother, of course. We're waiting. Marcus is counting on you. Don't let him down. Sarah's eyes burned with tears she refused to shed. She opened her banking app, staring at the balance in her savings account. 3 years of careful budgeting, of saying no to trips and dinners out, of working overtime and selling prints at weekend markets, all of it sitting there in neat digital numbers, ready to disappear in service of someone else's crisis. She thought about calling her best friend Jen, but what would she say? Jen had been telling her for years to cut her family off, to stop enabling Marcus, to save herself. Jen would be furious if she knew what Sarah was considering, and she'd be right to be furious. Sarah's thumb hovered over the transfer button. Just one click. One click, and $15,000 would move from her account to her parents, and Marcus would be free, and everything would be exactly the same as it always was. Marcus would promise to change. Her parents would promise to pay her back. Neither promise would be kept, and she would be back to square one, maybe even further back, her dreams deferred once again. But what if this time was different? What if Marcus really did learn his lesson? What if being in jail, facing real consequences, was the wake-up call he needed? And what if she said no, and something terrible happened to him in there? Could she live with that? She made the transfer. Her finger moved almost without conscious thought, muscle memory from years of giving in, of choosing the path that kept the peace, that maintained the fragile connection to her family, even at the cost of her own well-being. The confirmation screen appeared, transaction complete. Sarah felt hollow. She sent a text to her mother with the confirmation number, then turned off her phone. She couldn't face their gratitude right now, couldn't stomach the thank yous that would come with unspoken expectations of future help, future sacrifices. She didn't sleep for the rest of the night. She lay in bed, watching the darkness gradually give way to grey dawn, thinking about choices and consequences, about family and obligation, about the invisible chains that bound her to people who took everything and gave so little back. At 7:30, her phone buzzed with messages. Her mother, effusive with gratitude and promises. Her father, gruff but relieved. Nothing from Marcus. There never was. Sarah got ready for work mechanically, going through the motions of her morning routine with numb efficiency. She made coffee she didn't drink. She put on professional clothes that felt like a costume. She was supposed to be shooting a wedding that afternoon, capturing other people's joy and celebration, and she had no idea how she was going to summon the energy. At 9:15, as she was walking into the community center where she worked part-time, her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her swipe to accept the call. "Is this Sarah Chen?" A man's voice, formal and measured. "Yes." "Who is this?" "This is Detective James Morrison with the Metro Police Department. I'm calling about your brother, Marcus Chen." Sarah's heart stopped. "What's wrong? Did something happen? I thought he was being released." "Ma'am, I need to inform you that your brother was released on bail approximately 1 hour ago. However, there are some things about his case that I believe you should be aware of, given that you posted his bail." "I'm listening." Sarah's voice came out barely above a whisper. "The accident your brother was involved in last night was serious. A 52-year-old woman named Patricia Reynolds was crossing the street in a marked crosswalk when your brother ran a red light and struck her with his vehicle. She's currently in critical condition at Mercy Hospital with multiple fractures, internal bleeding, and a severe traumatic brain injury. The doctors aren't sure if she's going to make it." Sarah's legs gave out. She sat down hard on a bench near the entrance, the world spinning around her. "My parents said someone was hurt, but they didn't say." "Miss Chen? I'm calling you specifically because of something we discovered during our investigation. Your brother's blood alcohol level was 15, nearly twice the legal limit. But we also found something else. He had cocaine in his system, and we discovered approximately 2 ounces of cocaine in his vehicle, packaged for distribution." The words didn't make sense at first. They bounced off Sarah's comprehension like stones off water. Cocaine. Distribution. This wasn't just a terrible accident. This was something else entirely. "I don't understand," she said weakly. "The bail, the charges. My parents said it was just DUI, just an accident." The bail hearing this morning covered the vehicular assault charges and the DUI. However, we're filing additional charges related to drug possession with intent to distribute. Those charges are going to be filed this afternoon. The bail amount for those charges is likely to be substantial if bail is granted at all. "Why are you telling me this?" Detective Morrison's voice softened slightly. "Because, in my experience, family members often don't know the full story. They get partial information, emotional pleas, and they make decisions based on love and loyalty without knowing all the facts. Your brother has been on our radar for 6 months as part of a larger investigation into drug distribution in the city. Last night's accident forced us to move sooner than we wanted, but we have enough evidence to charge him with multiple felonies." Sarah couldn't speak. Her mind was reeling, trying to reconcile the brother she thought she knew with the person the detective was describing. Marcus had problems. Yes, he drank too much, made bad decisions, couldn't hold down a job. But drugs? Distribution? This was something else, something darker and more dangerous than she'd ever imagined. "Miss Chen, are you still there?" "Yes," she managed. "I'm here. There's something else. The woman your brother hit, Patricia Reynolds, she's a single mother of 3. Her oldest daughter is 17, getting ready to graduate high school. The youngest is 8. Mrs. Reynolds works 2 jobs to support them, substitute teaching during the day and cleaning offices at night. She was on her way home from her night shift when your brother hit her." Sarah felt sick. She thought of her $15,000. Money that could have helped this woman and her children, instead going to free someone who had nearly killed her. The injustice of it burned in her throat like acid. "I thought you should know who you were helping by posting that bail," Detective Morrison continued, "and I thought you should know the full extent of what your brother is facing. When these new charges are filed, he's going to need a lot more than $15,000. He's looking at serious prison time." "Thank you for telling me," Sarah said, her voice hollow. Miss Chen, one more thing. You have no legal obligation to continue supporting your brother financially through this process. Just because you posted bail doesn't mean you're responsible for anything else. I've seen too many good people bankrupt themselves trying to save family members who don't want to be saved. Whatever you decide to do from here, make sure it's for the right reasons. After the detective hung up, Sarah sat on that bench for a long time. Around her, life continued. People walked past, checking their phones, laughing with friends, carrying coffees and bags, and the normal burdens of normal lives. She felt disconnected from all of it, as if she were watching from behind glass. Her phone buzzed. Her mother, "Marcus is out. We're taking him home. He wants to thank you. Can you come by for dinner tonight? I'm making his favorite." Sarah stared at the message. Her mother wanted to celebrate, to make Marcus's favorite meal, to gather the family as if this were a triumph, as if Sarah had saved the day rather than enabled something terrible. She thought about Patricia Reynolds lying in a hospital bed, fighting for her life. She thought about 3 children who might lose their mother. She thought about the cocaine in Marcus's car, about 6 months of police investigation, about a pattern of behavior that went so far beyond what her parents had told her. They had lied, or at the very least, they had concealed the truth, giving her just enough information to manipulate her into doing what they wanted. They had used her love, her sense of duty, her guilt about being the one who made it out and built a stable life. And they had used all of it to make her complicit in something she never would have agreed to if she'd known the truth. Sarah's hands were steady as she typed her response. No. 3 dots appeared immediately as her mother started typing, but Sarah didn't wait to read it. She opened her email and composed a message to a victims advocacy organization she'd found with a quick search. She explained the situation and asked how she could make an anonymous donation to Patricia Reynolds' family. $15,000 wouldn't undo what Marcus had done, wouldn't heal Patricia's injuries or erase her children's trauma, but it could help. It could do something good instead of enabling something terrible. Her mother's calls started coming in, one after another. Sarah sent them all to voicemail. Her father texted, his messages growing increasingly angry. "How dare you? After everything we've done for you. You've always thought you were better than us. You're abandoning your family." But Sarah felt something she hadn't felt in years when dealing with her family. She felt clear. She felt like she could breathe. She called Jen. "Hey, what's up? Aren't you supposed to be working?" Jen's cheerful voice was like sunshine breaking through clouds. "I need to tell you something," Sarah said. And then she told her everything. The 2 a.m. call, the bail money, the detective's revelations, her decision to redirect the money to Patricia's family instead of continuing to fund Marcus's defense. Jen was quiet for a long moment after Sarah finished. Then she said, "I'm proud of you. I know that probably doesn't mean much right now, but I'm really proud of you." Sarah's eyes filled with tears, the first she'd let fall since the phone rang in the dark hours of the morning. "They're going to hate me. They already hate me. My mom sent me 5 texts, calling me selfish and ungrateful. They were always going to hate you the moment you stopped doing what they wanted." Jen said gently, "That's the thing about toxic family dynamics. You're only valued as long as you're useful. The second you set a boundary, the second you say no, you become the villain. But that doesn't make you wrong. A woman might die because of what Marcus did," Sarah whispered. "She has 3 kids, Jen. 3 kids who might lose their mother because my brother decided to drive drunk and high with cocaine in his car. And I gave my parents money to get him out of jail so he could come home and eat his favorite dinner like nothing happened. You didn't know. They didn't tell you the truth. That's on them, not you. But I should have asked more questions. I should have demanded to know exactly what happened before I transferred that money." "Maybe," Jen agreed. "But you were also woken up at 2 a.m. by people who have spent your entire life training you to respond to their crises without thinking, without questioning, without protecting yourself. They're experts at manipulating you, Sarah. They've had 28 years to perfect their technique. The fact that you're breaking free now, that's what matters." Sarah wiped her eyes. "I don't know what happens next. What do you want to happen?" It was such a simple question, but no one had asked Sarah what she wanted in longer than she could remember. What did she want? She wanted Marcus to face real consequences for what he'd done. She wanted Patricia Reynolds to survive and recover. She wanted her parents to understand the gravity of the situation, though she knew they never would. She wanted to be free of the guilt and obligation that had governed her relationship with her family for as long as she could remember. "I want to not be responsible for Marcus anymore," she said slowly. "I want to live my own life without being on call for every crisis. I want to save my money for my dreams instead of his disasters. I want to help people who actually need help instead of enabling people who are determined to destroy themselves." "Then that's what you do," Jen said firmly, "starting right now." Over the next few days, Sarah's phone exploded with messages from her family. Her mother's texts evolved from angry to pleading to coldly distant. Her father sent a single message telling her she was no longer welcome in their home. Distant relatives she barely knew called to tell her she should be ashamed of herself, that family was everything, that she was selfish and cruel to abandon her brother in his time of need. None of them mentioned Patricia Reynolds. None of them acknowledged that Marcus had nearly killed someone. None of them seemed to understand that dealing drugs and driving under the influence had victims beyond just Marcus himself. Sarah blocked most of them. She kept her parents' numbers unblocked, just in case, but she sent their calls to voicemail and read their messages only when she felt strong enough to handle them. The victims' advocacy organization contacted her to confirm receipt of her donation. They told her that Patricia's family was overwhelmed with gratitude, that the money would help cover medical expenses and lost wages, that it might make the difference in keeping the family housed and fed while Patricia fought to recover. It was something. It wasn't enough, could never be enough to undo the harm, but it was something. Sarah learned from news reports that Marcus had been charged with multiple felonies, including possession with intent to distribute, vehicular assault, and DUI. His bail was revoked entirely after the drug charges were filed, and he was remanded to custody pending trial. Her parents tried to call her, demanding money for a lawyer, but Sarah didn't answer. She'd said what she needed to say in a carefully worded email, explaining her position and her boundaries. She mourned the family she'd always wanted, the parents who would prioritize doing what was right over protecting Marcus from consequences, the brother who could have been someone different if someone had held him accountable years ago. She mourned the relationships that might have been possible in some alternate universe where love wasn't conditional on compliance. But she also felt lighter. The guilt that had weighed on her for years began to lift, replaced by something that felt almost like peace. She went to therapy. She threw herself into her work. She started making real plans for her photography studio, looking at spaces, pricing equipment, building a business plan. 6 weeks after that 2 a.m. call, Sarah received a letter at her apartment. The return address was Mercy Hospital. Inside was a handwritten note on floral stationery. "Dear Miss Chen, my name is Rebecca Reynolds. I'm Patricia Reynolds' oldest daughter. The Victims Advocacy Organization told us that you made an anonymous donation to help our family, but they also said you might be okay with us knowing who you were and being able to thank you directly. I don't know what to say except thank you. Mom is still in the hospital, but she's improving. The doctors say she'll make a full recovery, though it will take time. She's going to need months of physical therapy and she can't work, but because of your donation, we don't have to worry about losing our apartment or my younger siblings going hungry. You've given us the space to focus on Mom's recovery instead of panicking about survival. I also want you to know that I don't blame you for what your brother did." The victim advocate explained the situation to me, how you were misled and how you made it right as soon as you knew the truth. That takes courage and integrity. Not everyone would have done what you did. My mom always taught us that you can't choose your family, but you can choose what kind of person you want to be. It sounds like you've made that choice, and you've chosen to be someone who helps people who actually need it instead of enabling harm. That matters more than you know. If you ever want to meet my mom when she's recovered, I know she'd like to thank you in person. But if you'd rather maintain your privacy, we understand that too. Either way, please know that you've made a real difference in our lives. With gratitude, Rebecca. Sarah read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down her face. These were different tears than the ones she'd shed in the dark, early morning hours 6 weeks ago. These were tears of relief and validation and the beginning of healing. She wrote back to Rebecca, thanking her for her words and explaining that she'd like to visit Patricia when she was well enough for visitors. Not to assuage guilt or seek absolution, but because she wanted to see with her own eyes that some good had come from the worst night of her life. Meanwhile, Marcus's case proceeded through the justice system. Sarah stayed informed through public records, but she didn't reach out, and she didn't respond to her family's increasingly desperate pleas for help. It was hard. Some days, it was the hardest thing she'd ever done. But it was also necessary. Her parents eventually stopped calling. They sent a final message saying she was dead to them, that she'd chosen strangers over her own blood, that she'd regret her selfishness someday. Sarah felt a pang of sadness when she read it, but underneath the sadness was a foundation of certainty. She hadn't chosen strangers over family. She'd chosen doing what was right over doing what was convenient. She'd chosen the victims over the perpetrator. She'd chosen herself. 3 months after that 2 a.m. call, Sarah signed a lease on a small studio space for her photography business. It was in a revitalized part of downtown, with good light and high ceilings and enough room for a small gallery space. Her savings were depleted from the donation to Patricia's family and starting the business, but she was rebuilding. This time, she was building something that was truly hers. On the day she got her keys, she sat in the empty studio and thought about the path that had led her here. If her parents hadn't called that night, if she hadn't transferred that money, if Detective Morrison hadn't called to tell her the truth, she might still be trapped in the same cycle of enabling and sacrifice that had defined her relationship with her family for her entire life. It had taken a crisis to break her free. It had taken her brother nearly killing someone and her parents' willingness to lie to her for her to finally see clearly. It had cost her $15,000 and her relationship with her family to learn that she could say no, that she could set boundaries, that her dreams and well-being mattered as much as anyone else's. It was the most expensive and painful lesson of her life. But sitting in that empty studio, watching dust motes dance in the afternoon light, Sarah couldn't bring herself to regret it. Because for the first time in her life, she was free. Free to build something of her own, free to make choices based on what was right rather than what kept the peace. Free to be the person she wanted to be, instead of the person her family needed her to be. Her phone buzzed, not her parents this time, but Jen, asking if she wanted to grab dinner to celebrate the new studio. Sarah smiled and typed back, yes. She locked up the studio and walked out into the late afternoon sun, leaving the shadows of her past behind her and stepping into a future that was finally, truly her own. The 2 a.m. call had demanded $15,000 and revealed the truth, but in the end, it had given her something far more valuable than money. It had given her back herself. That night changed everything. Not because of the $15,000, but because it forced me to see the truth. I couldn't save my brother from the consequences of his choices, but I could stop sacrificing my future to protect someone who refused to change. For the first time, I chose what was right over what was familiar. I chose accountability over guilt, and I chose myself. If this story made you pause even for a moment, if you've ever been asked to carry someone else's mistakes just because you're family, you're not alone. Let me know in the comments. What would you have done in my place? And if stories like this remind you that your boundaries matter, like this video, subscribe and stay until the end of the next story. Because sometimes the hardest lesson is also the one that sets you free.